Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. Today is the 9th of May, which means that many countries celebrate the Victory Day. And of course, especially it concerns the Russian Federation because the Victory Day is one of the most important holidays for Russia, for Belarus, and of course for many other countries. And as you may know, these days the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, made lots of statements about upcoming parade, and he threatened that he would attack the Red Square, he would attack the Russian parade, and so on. And of course the situation was very difficult. The Russians announced a 2-day ceasefire, but the Russian ceasefire was rejected by the Ukrainians at the beginning. And of course, almost till the beginning of the 9th of May, there were some concerns that the Ukrainians indeed would attack the Red Square and so on. But probably several hours before the beginning of the 9th of May of 2026, the President of the United States of America made a very important statement. He said that I am pleased to announce that there will be a 3-day ceasefire in the war between Russia and Ukraine. The celebration in Russia is for Victory Day, but likewise in Ukraine, because they were also a big part and factor of World War II. This ceasefire will include a suspension of all kinetic activity and also a prison swap of 1,000 prisoners from each country. This request was made directly by me, and I very much appreciate its agreement by President Vladimir Putin and President Vladimir Zelensky. Hopefully, it is the beginning of the end of a very long, deadly and hard-fought war. The talks are continuing on ending this major conflict, the biggest since World War II, and we are getting closer and closer every day. And right after the President of the United States of America made this statement, both the Russians and the Ukrainians confirmed this. For example, Special Aide Ushakov stated that Russia agreed to support Trump's initiative to extend the ceasefire with Ukraine until May 11th. Russia supported Trump's initiative to conduct a 4,000 prisoner exchange with Kyiv by May 11th. Agreement on extending the ceasefire and exchanging prisoners were reached during telephone contacts with the US presidential administration. Importantly, President Trump's initiative for a ceasefire and prisoner exchange is timed to coincide with the 81st anniversary of Victory Day. The President of Ukraine, Zelensky, also confirmed the situation, but he did this in his manner. He published a very interesting law, a very interesting order. He said that, taking into account the numerous requests for the humanitarian purpose outlined in the negotiations with the American side on May 8, 2026, I resolve. So it's like his decision, his resolution. Allow a parade to be held on May 9, 2026 in the city of Moscow, Russian Federation, for the duration of the parade from 10 a.m. Kyiv time on May 9, 2026. The territorial square of Red Square should be excluded from the plan for the use of Ukrainian weapons. This decree shall enter into force on the day of its signing. So obviously this is something like an act of humiliation of the Russian Federation, and obviously this statement means that most likely on the 12th of May everything will start from the beginning, will resume. We are talking about clashes along the line of combat contact, but most likely the next 3 days we won't see anything. But probably there are very high chances that this ceasefire would be violated on the 11th of May of 2026, somewhere at noontime. Now let's return to Russia, to Moscow, and let's discuss the most important details about the parade. According to information we have, the presidents of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan will participate in Victory Day celebrations in Moscow. That was stated by Yuri Ushakov. Also, he said that Vladimir Putin will also hold a friendly lunch with Alexander Lukashenko, the president of the Republic of Belarus. Furthermore, we know that the Prime Minister of the Slovak Republic also came to Moscow, and this is the moment when he arrived on the stage of the city of Moscow. And according to information we he brought a message to the president of Russia. The Ukraine conflict is nearing in an end, according to Robert Fico. The main message I want to convey to President Putin, the key word is dialogue. We must meet and talk together. I am an absolute supporter of any kind of ceasefire. I believe it's 100 times better to sit at the table and negotiate, the Slovak Prime Minister added. And I would like to point your attention that this is the message that was sent by the President of Ukraine, Zelensky. So which means that President of Ukraine, Zelensky, wants a dialogue between Russia and Ukraine, between, first of all, Putin and Zelensky himself. So this is the situation, of course, and we have several videos from parade itself. For example, in this video, we can see the President of Russia and the President of the Republic of Belarus right at the beginning of the parade, and here we can see several videos and several pictures from the parade itself. The parade in Moscow is being commanded by General Mordvichev, the commander of the ground forces, who led the storming of Mariupol. The Minister of Defense is attending the parade in civilian form. And according to information we have, during parade, the Russians published pictures and videos of the 5th generation Geranium drone, and here we can see these pictures. So this is the most modern Russian weapon when talking about drones, of course, not missiles but just drones. And probably that's it. The sources are saying that the parade was very short, up to 45 minutes, so this was the shortest parade, and this is first of all the 5th parade during the special military operation, and this parade is the shortest parade since the beginning of the special military operation, which means that the Russians understand that it's too dangerous to carry out all these things during the war period of time, despite the fact that the ceasefire was announced. As for the city of Ukraine and as for the city of Kiev, during the previous 24 hours, lots of updates and lots of videos were published on the matter of exodus of the citizens of Kiev from the city. As you can see, many cars were leaving the city of Kiev, probably due to holidays or maybe due to the words that were made by the Russians that if the Ukrainians violate the May's holiday ceasefire, the Russians will attack the central part of Kiev with Oreshnik missiles. So as you can see, lots of people were leaving the city of Kiev, just trying to stay on the safe side. At least this is how the pro-Russian sources showed the situation. And of course, maybe one of the most important thing that forced the Ukrainians to leave the city of Kiev was this video published by pro-Russian sources. And here we can see the Russian drone that was flying over the central part of the city of Kiev. And here we can see the Ukrainian parliament. So the Russians with this video were trying to show the Ukrainians that they carry out and conduct always reconnaissance operation over the central part of the city of Kiev, and the Russians know when exactly they can attack and what to attack and how to attack. All these things, of course, forced the Ukrainians to leave the city of Kiev from one side, but from the other side, the fact that the Ukrainians were leaving the city of Kiev means that the Ukrainians don't trust the President of Ukraine, Zelensky. And this video, first of all, shows us that the Ukrainians indeed believed that the President of Ukraine probably could have attacked the territory of Russia and the Red Square during the 9th of May. So this is the situation. This is how the things are developing. And of course, we have a lots of videos from the line of combat contacts. Before moving there, the ceasefire. The question is whether both the Russians and the Ukrainians follow ceasefire, and we have an answer to this question. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning reported that during the previous nights, not during the previous night, but during the previous 12 hours, 44 drones of Russian Federation were recorded over the sky of Ukraine, and 34 of them were destroyed, but this is the number between that includes the drones between evening of the 8th of May and the morning 8 a.m. of the 9th of May. And the most important thing is that the Russians and the Minister of Defense of Russia shown the same number. For example, first the Russians stated that between 8 p.m. and 12 a.m. between 8 p.m. of the 8th of May and 12 a.m. of the 9th of May, the Russians destroyed destroyed 44 drones. And later, the Russians clarified this number, and they stated that between 8 p.m. and 12 a.m. the Russians destroyed 44 drones. So as for the morning already of the day. So as we can see, the Russians and the Ukrainians used the same number of drones to attack each other. 44 drones from one side and from another side, which means that it's something like a mirroring acting. As for the situation on the ground during the previous day, during the previous morning, this morning, pro-Russian sources published lots of videos with Russian flags along the line of combat contact. We have the Russian flag from the area of the Kherson direction. Here we can see the Russian drone that dropped the Russian flag on some construction. So this video doesn't mean that the Russians have control over the village of Ivanovka, which is located on the Ukrainian side of the river of Dnipro, but it's just the way how the Russians believe they congratulated the Ukrainians with the victory day. Another video is coming from the Donetsk direction, from the Pokrovsk settlements of Grishna. This video was also published by pro-Russian sources, and here we can see how Russians were using old Soviet flags and how the Russians were raising old Soviet and Russian flags through the cities like Pokrovsk, Seversk, Grishna, so through the entire line of combat contact. But when talking about geolocations, we haven't received anything from, let's say, additional territories that were taken by Russians as a result of offensives. Every single flag was raised on the territories that are already colored as red, according to, for example, this map. And we have a video from the city, from the village of Kriva Luka. If you remember, just yesterday, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that as a result of clashes, the Russians established complete control over the village of Kriva Luka. And these are the changes on the ground that have been recorded in this area. This is the end of the 7th of May, this is the end of the 8th of May, this is the beginning of the 9th of May. The Russians reported they took under control the village, and this morning pro-Russian sources published this video where we can see how exactly the clashes for the settlement of Kriva Luka were taking place, and how exactly and where exactly the Russians raised their Russian flags through the territory of the settlement of Kriva Luka. So at least 3 episodes were geolocated, at least 3 flags were recorded through the video, and based on this video we haven't adjusted anything, but this video confirms that indeed, as a result of clashes, the Russians established complete control over the settlement of Kriva Luka. So we have covered most of the updates regarding parade probably, and regarding the relations between Russia and Ukraine. And just a few words about the current status along the line of combat contact, because we have changes, probably changes that were achieved by Russians before ceasefire, before this ceasefire, but I believe that we need to discuss them in details. And first, let's talk about the western Zaporozhye direction. Today we finished adjusting the map around the settlement of Stepnogorsk, and these are the changes between the dates since the beginning of May of 2026. And as you can see, according to this situation, at the beginning of May, the Ukrainians launched their western Zaporozhye major offensive operation, and as a result of this western Zaporozhye major offensive operation carried out by the Ukrainians managed to improve their position significantly and almost recapture the settlement of Stepnogorsk and everything in this area. So huge territories and significant number of villages were recaptured by the Ukrainians, according to different sources. Of course, we are waiting for additional geolocations to receive more proofs, but most likely this is the situation on the ground. For some reason, the group of forces Dnipro were forced to fall back from this area towards the settlement of Kamenska with the purpose to organize defenses in this area. If Russians lose control over the city of Stepnogorsk, this is going to be a very, very painful situation for them, because the Russians wasted a month to take these territories under complete control, and now the Russians are about to lose all these territories just within a week of clashes with the Ukrainian forces. Another important area is the settlement of Verkhnya Tersa. Today a video was published. We haven't added this video, but the video exists, and we have a video where we might see how the Ukrainians were attacking Russians that were located in the most southern parts of the settlement of Verkhnya Tersa. So we start receiving the first updates that confirm Russian control over at least the southern and maybe even over the southeastern parts of the settlement, and that the Russians continue advancing further in the northern and the northwestern direction. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 8th of May, and this is the beginning of the 9th of May. Most likely right after the end of the May ceasefire, we might see additional changes and the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation about complete control over the territory.
This mouse backpack is the best I've ever used.
Introducing the Mouse Xmas.
Now let's move further. As for the city of Kostyantynivka, the Russians during the previous days before the beginning of the May ceasefire managed to improve their positions significantly. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 7th, this is the end of the 8th, and this is already the beginning of the 9th of May of 2026. The Russians improved both through the eastern part of the southeastern parts of the city of Kostyantynivka. We made these changes based on the video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. Here we can see how the Ukrainians were attacking edge positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this area, and we have a report that the Russians also managed to improve their positions significantly through the western parts of the settlement, and the Russians are about to establish complete control over the western citadel of the city, and it seems according to this report that the Russians have already done this. So these are the changes on the ground through the western parts of the city of Kostyantynivka. This is the end of the 8th of May, and this is already the beginning of the 9th of May of 2026. The main part of the battle of the city of Kostyantynivka has passed. The Russians seems to me captured the southwestern and the western parts of the city, and the Ukrainians in coming days most likely would be forced to fall back from this area in the northern direction, of course, if they have this possibility, because the Russians have complete and total epidrawn control over the territory. And this report about the Russian progress on the ground was published by pro-Russian source. And as of the beginning of the 9th of May of 2026, we can say that the Russians captured up to 30% of the city of Kostyantynivka. So somewhere around 29 and 30% of the city, and the Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians, when they finished the battle for the settlement of Novodmitrievka, moved their forces further in the northern direction, and the Russians answered the settlement of Molocharka. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates through the northeastern flank of the city of Kostyantynivka. So the Russians are cutting the city of Kostyantynivka into several pieces and encircling the settlement from the northeast and from the north, trying to cut both the city of Kostyantynivka itself and the pockets between the cities of Ceasefire and Kostyantynivka, where significant number of forces of troops of the armed forces of Ukraine are concentrated. But most likely, due to this configuration, the front line, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back in this area. Otherwise, the Ukrainians are risked to be encircled by Russians. As for the Krivaluka direction, Slavinsk direction, we discussed this village video, and we have small changes, minor changes to the north of the settlement of Fedorovka, and these changes were provided by pro-Russian sources. The Russians continue advancing. Once again, I believe that we'll see a ceasefire today on the 9th of May. Most likely tomorrow we'll see a ceasefire, but it seems that through the 11th of May, the ceasefire would be violated both by the Russians and the Ukrainians somewhere at noontime. And that's it for the short video. The Military Summary channel reminds us to